So with our production switcher, we're able to do a lot of amazing things. And there are different types of production switchers. There are, like I said at the very beginning of the switcher videos, is there's some production switchers that are very small, can handle just a few inputs, and then there's some that are extremely robust and can handle 40 cameras easily, like you saw with the other videos. But for our production switcher, I want to talk a little bit about the one that we use, and this one is called the Broadcast Pix. And our switcher has multiple built-in stores, and you have a type of store called a CG store. So this is going to be a name graphic like the title you see here. The second type of store is known as a still store, and this stores a still image. So things like an over-the-shoulder graphic would be a still store. Then you have a clip store, which stores video clips, videos, music, animations, things like that. And then you have an animation store. And an animation is similar to a video, but it has an alpha channel built in. So this spinning logo that you can kind of see over our anchors is actually considered an animation because it is a short looping video, but it also has that alpha channel that lets you see our anchors as well. Now, when you look at the Broadcast Pix, and again, I've got the picture of this switcher up on canvas that you can look at and get a better feel for how the switcher works. Our production switcher has various sections. So each of these individual rows is known as a bus, and a bus has a specific function. So this bottom white row is known as a preview bus. So I can preview something before I put it on the air. Likewise, the green row has a program bus. So this goes live on the air. The next bus is memories and recalls that I'll talk about a little bit later. You've got another preview and program bus because I have two parts of my switcher that I can do independent switching with. And then the top allows me to do what's known as routing. So if I have a monitor behind an anchor, I can select that monitor and then put different video sources in it by selecting this source bus. So each of these individual rows is known as a bus. Now, when you combine two buses together that work as a single unit, this is what's called as a bank. So at the bottom, I've got program and preview that is a bank. Above it, another program and preview is a bank. Above that is a router that has source and destinations. This is a bank. Down here in the memories, this is not a bank. Why? If you said because it's only a single row, you are correct. So when we're dealing with parts of the switcher, there may be times where we're going to need program and preview to work together. So we're going to need a bank of buttons as opposed to a single bus. Now, I talked about a moment ago that our switcher has the ability to switch two different sources. And that's and the way that's set up is each of those switchers has a program and a preview. So the board is usually denoting that if it's a white button like these buttons over here, and those buttons, anything that's going to be in white tends to be a preview to let you look at it before it goes on the air, as opposed to things that are going to be in a green row. That's going to be program, and that's what people are going to see as the end result. So I've got a program down there and there. So depending on which way that we're switching the board, you can either have two programs going out at the same time, or you can have one program feeding into the second, and then that can go out. So you can overlap multiple things at one time and do a lot of various features. So a couple of videos ago, I talked about keys. So you had things like a CG or a still and over the shoulder, things with an embedded alpha channel or a matte or an animation. Well, you're going to see those by using these buttons here, and these are called our keyers. Our production switcher, the Broadcast Pix, has 6 keyers. And so the two rows are going to kind of share it. And again, green's going to denote program. So if I hit this green button, that graphic is going to go live on the air, whether I'm ready for it or if it's the right one or wrong one or not. But if I look at something in preview, I get to make sure that it's correct before I put it on the air. And so a closer look at that is these are my preview keys. So if I have an anchor and I toggle a preview, I can see the anchor with the preview. And so you can kind of see, well, I'm blocking the name, so I'll get out of the shot for a moment. So you can kind of see that I've got my anchor, I've got the name graphic, and I can see that this is in fact Anna, and that I've got the right person. And that's the wrong way. So I'm going to come back and switch to that camera. So by having a preview, you can look at things and make sure that you have the right thing. Now with program, when you hit that green button, it's going to put that name graphic live whether you're ready or not. So if I go and get out of the way real quick, so if I look at this anchor and I hit the name graphic button, it goes on. I hope that's the right name. I'm trusting that's the right name. But if that name was a person's name, I'm sorry, a male name, or anybody not Anna. So if I look down and this has a name like John or David, I know that I've made a mistake, and I'll probably want to take that green button and pull it off as soon as I can in order to fix that situation. Now, the next part we have of our switcher is what's known as the mix bus, where I've got things like cut, preview, fade, and this fader bar. I'm going to ignore these keys, but I've got two mix buses because my switcher has the ability to put out two outputs. Now, when we combine multiple parts of our switcher, like I said, I have the ability to do two outputs. This entire group is what becomes a ME bus, and we call it a bus because it's a single functioning unit, much as the individual buses were single functioning. So as you can see in this bottom one called ME2, I've got program, preview, I've got my keyers, I have a fader bar, and then I have the same thing up top, program and preview. I've got my keyers, I've got my fader bar, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. So by having these various ME buses, I can have one piece of video ready to go, and then I can have another piece of video already being processed, and I can easily switch back and forth between the two. So when we're dealing with a mix effects bus, each of those columns that you see in the switcher, and I'll go back for a moment. So each of these columns is going to represent a specific video source. So for me, this first column is nothing but camera 1. So if I push it, I'll see camera 1 in this output. If I come up here and I hit this, I'll see camera 1 in that output. So each of these individual columns represents a separate video source. Now each row has a specific function. So each row could be a mix effects of various things. That could be keyers and like-minded. Now, when we're dealing with these two ME buses, one of them is going to be seen superimposed in front of the other, and this is what's known as downstream. So I have, if I have keyer 1 on the air and I access key 2, key 2 is not going to be blocked by it. It's actually going to be in front of key 1, and it's going to block whatever ME1 is using. So whenever we put them together, I have the ability, and I have a little button down here called ME1, and I'm able to see ME1, and I can use that to put it on the air. But likewise, I do have the ability to do a program and a preview, so I can see what's going on. In this case, I'm switching between this person that's talking with a bow tie and our host, and just by hitting cut, I'm able to flip back and forth between those two various shots. Now, when I talked about this section, the mix effects bus, this allows me to do the transitions that I need. So if I hit cut, you get that instantaneous transition of me popping in and out. If I have auto trans, that's where you can have your fade. And with auto trans, I can either do the fade or I can switch to a wipe. And I can do that geometric wipe, the heart shape or the star, whatever transition you're going to have. And with the auto trans, every time you push that button, it's going to happen over the same amount of time. So for us, the auto trans is set for 1 second. So when I hit auto trans, it takes 1 second to fade. If I hit it again, 1 second. If I do a wipe, it'll take 1 second to do that wipe, or 1 second to come back. Now with this bar here, you actually have a little bar that you can sort of move it up and move it back, and you can manually control how fast or how slow that transition happens. So sometimes if you're doing a production on a musical concert and you have some musicians that are playing a very slow soft piece, you may take that fader bar and do a slow fade, or if the music speeds up, you may do like a little bit faster fade to get the transition going faster. So the fader bar is going to work a lot like the auto transition, only you have the ability to determine how fast that's going to go. And then one of the things also to note is with the keyers, they have a particular order. So one key is in front of the other, that's going to be in front of the other. So some keys are going to be blocking each other. So when you set up your keyers, you want to make sure that you have them set in a proper order. So when I look at this graphic, the first thing I have is my camera in the background. The next thing I have is my CG background, which is this red bar at number 2. So that bar is now in front of him. Up next, I've got the text. So if I had my orders backwards, then the text would disappear if it was behind. But in this case, the text is downstream. So we're going from behind and we're moving forward and forward. Up next, I've got my logo. So by having these 3 keyers and a background, we're able to pull off this graphic. So I've got a logo, I've got my name, I've got their sports information, and we're able to do that. But if we had our layers backwards, then you may see only half the logo would show, or the text might not even be there. So you have to be careful when you're dealing with downstream keyers. Now, in television, a lot of times you will see in the bottom right corner, there's usually a logo for the station or the network or the show that is broadcasting. And these logos are, again, downstream of everything else. So these logos are usually put on by the network right before they are broadcast out. So in this upper corner, I've got 2 logos, one in the bottom left and one in the bottom right. The one in the bottom right is the name of the show. And this logo was added when they were shooting the show. Now, the network that's broadcasting the show is Fox News. And so they put their logo on very last. And because Fox News has always said our logo is going to be in the bottom left of the screen, if you're adding one for your show, make sure it's in another part of the screen so that it does not block ours, or so that we do not block your logo. So in this case, we have 2 images, and you do have one that's downstream of the other. And so again, when we're building parts of our show, there are some elements that take time to build. So when I did a type of story called News from Around the State, I would have to select my background. I would then have to go in and select my animation from the various animations that we use. I'd have to then change my category to CGs and select the appropriate CG, and then use my keyers to build them all together. And that alone has taken me about 30 seconds to describe what I want. One of the advantages of the switchers are what are known as memories. And a memory is how the switcher, what state it was in, what graphics it had when that memory was saved. So I can go in and quickly just hit a memory that says state, and it will automatically pull up my 3 elements. It'll put them in the right order, and then it can even put them in preview. So all I got to do is hit cut and get the graphic up. And so I can have memories to quickly change out the show. So I can do a memory for news and then switch over to sports, then switch over to weather. I can do a memory to go from an anchor with a key on the left to the other anchor with the key on the right, to both of the anchors that have another graphic like in the monitor behind them. So memories give you the ability to quickly change the configuration of your show, and some of these memories can even recall a sequence of events. So I can press a memory that will start off with a graphic, and it'll fade a second graphic on, and then while that's happening, it'll switch from one camera to the other in the background, and then it'll pull that other graphic off, so you have a transition happening that looks a lot better than you just trying to switch between 1 or 2 things. So the memories can either be a snapshot of the way it was saved, or you can record a sequence of events to help your show run a little bit smoother. Now, looking at our switcher, this is what our CG bank looks like. From the director's perspective, you can look, and I've got name graphics like what our anchor has here. We have the 3 for our state stories. I've got other types of CGs from different categories depending on what we need. And then we can quickly pick and choose whatever elements suit us best. From the still store bank, we have all the graphics that we build in place. And one of the things you might notice in this particular case is the graphics are sideways. And this is because this particular image behind our anchor is a monitor that is turned sideways. So we took it, stood it up, and in order for the graphics to look right, we had to build them sideways so you would see that correct presentation. Another type of thing that our switcher has is, like I said, the still store. And in the still store, we have various clips that we can play. So right now you can kind of see that corner. There's an opening for a sports show that we have that we would talk about various events. You can also see that there are other elements that we would incorporate into our show. So we have a setup where we have 2 anchors and there's a TV behind them, and we'll put a graphic like one of these in behind them. So we're able to switch between a drone at the White House or autism or something else. And we can quickly change those monitors using that clip store. The last thing I talked about was what's called an animation. And an animation is a video clip that has an alpha channel. So you can kind of see there's a black level here that's matching this animation. We've got another one that has a blue bar up top and a little red bar at the bottom. We've got name graphics. This is one that we can superimpose over our weather camera that you saw earlier. And our weather camera is just a camera that's looking out over the campus. So we can have that show through, and our weather anchor can reference what they see on the weather camera. And so that's just a lot of the full aspects that our production switcher has. We have the ability to switch many things, not quite as much as I've seen with other productions, but for television news, for like the 3 cameras and everything you see here, we're able to do a really good job pulling off a very well polished production. And using this switcher, it's ideal for what we need. It's not too big so that we're not using every aspect of it. It's not really too small so that we wish we had more, but we couldn't do it. We're limited by the size of the switcher. So depending on your production, if it's going to be something large like a sporting event, a halftime show, a major debate or discussion, you may need a larger switcher. If you have something that's just like 2 people sitting over in a chair and you've got a couple cameras for like a quick little podcast or a talk show, having a smaller switcher would probably work really well to suit your needs. So it all just kind of comes down to what you need and the type of switcher you need. And there are switchers that range in multiple prices. I've seen some for just a couple of $100s to the really large production switcher, much like this, that can run hundreds of thousands of dollars because of all the technology that goes into it. So if you ever need a switcher, find one